Hey, hi, I'm Selena with Andy's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Dan Koboldt,
Hello.
and he's a science fiction writer. And I'm going to let him, basically, I would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself. And for readers unfamiliar with your work, how would you describe what you write?
Uh, well, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. Like you said, my name is Dan Koboldt. I live in Central Ohio. I'm a research scientist by day. That's my main job. I work in the field of genetics. And so I've always been interested in science fiction since I was a kid, since I obviously knew I was going to go into science as a career. And so I've worked at my current place of employment, which is a major children's hospital, for about 4 years. But before that, I worked at Washington University, which is one of the 3 large-scale sequencing centers that did the Human Genome Project. So I've been in the field for 15 or 16 years now, but I've been writing for a little bit less time. I think I started writing seriously in 2008 or 2009. And so I'm a family man too. I have a wife and 3 kids and a dog, and that's me. That's my introduction. So since you asked what I write fantasy and science fiction. You can see some of the titles behind me here. My first series was with HarperCollins, the epic fantasy trilogy. And my next book, which is going to come out in January, is called Domesticating Dragons. That's this one over here. Also looks like this. And it's the way I've been describing it is Build-A-Bear Workshop meets Jurassic Park.
Okay, that sounds great. Um, so, what was the inspiration for domesticating dragons?
Well, I have 2 sort of loves when it comes to writing. I like sort of hard sci-fi type of stuff because of my day job. That's what I do every day. And then I also love dragons. So I was just really looking for a way to combine these 2 loves into one super project of some kind. And so I just got the idea that maybe genetic engineering would soon progress to the point where we could start to create new organisms. And obviously, if that were up to me, the first thing I would make is a dragon. And so that was sort of the impetus for writing this book, is what would happen if that came to pass.
Okay, and what were the steps that you took to bring your initial inspiration to the finished book?
Well, actually, I first wrote it as a novella, and so it's about half the length of a full-length novel. And it was just kind of exploring the idea of a genetic engineer who goes to work for the company that just happens to make uh, dragons for sale in the home, customizable dragons. And then but I eventually decided to develop that into a larger book. And so I brought in, I wanted to bring another story about sort of the main character and his motivations for getting into this field, because my agent was asking me, well, then, but why dragons? And I was like, I don't understand the question. He said, why why would he be interested in dragons? Why would he want to work for this company? And so it grew into this larger story about a guy who has a brother with a genetic disorder and has been fascinated since a young age with what causes genetic diseases, and sees going to work for this company as an opportunity maybe to do something about his brother's disease, which is something he doesn't necessarily tell the company about. So that was how this sort of evolved into a bigger and deeper story. And so we were very happy when we finished it, and Bain Books was interested in publishing it.
Great. What can readers, actually, what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
Well, I think that people who love dragons and will just read books about dragons. I fall into that category. If there's a book about a dragon, I'm already in. And I think there are a lot of people who are just drawn to science fiction in general, especially near future science fiction, because there's a lot of escapism and future thinking about what sort of points we could reach sometime soon as far as technology goes, as far as space exploration goes, as far as the future of our world goes. And a lot of people like to live in those worlds, even if they're imagined ones. And that's certainly what brought me to it.
Okay, great. And what kind of research went into creating this book? And then what was your favorite research story, and what cool facts and findings didn't make it into the book, but you loved discovering?
Oh, how much time do you have? I mean, the best part about this is the research that I did for the book is my real world research on genetics
Right.
and what causes genetic diseases. And so um, for the main character's brother, his diagnosis is uh, a spinal muscular atrophy condition. And it's something I actually studied when I first came to the Children's Hospital. One of the first cases that I worked on was a patient who was born with this striking um, muscular atrophy, almost a lack of skeletal muscle. And it was a diagnostic mystery for a number of years. And when I came here, I started working on the case, and we discovered this mutation in a gene called bicaudal D2, which is a gene that is conserved, meaning it's shared across many species. It's even in the fruit fly. It's a very important gene, but its role and specifically its contribution to human disease only really came to light a few years ago. And when we first found this mutation in this patient, the patients who had been described with BIC-D2 mutations had sort of a mild lower limb muscular atrophy phenotype. It was very, very different from what our patient had. Our patient had just a striking whole body effect and was wheelchair bound and just struggling to survive even as a child. And so it led us down this road of exploring what the range of severity could be among patients who have mutations in this gene. And it turns out that there were a number of families that were studied a decade or two ago, maybe more recently, somewhat recently, that had inherited variants in this gene that had the milder form of disease. And they have these super big pedigrees with 20 or 30 people affected, but they live long lives. It's usually sort of a later onset for them. Occasionally there would be a severe case, but most of the time it was sort of a milder atrophy. But there were a small and growing number of patients who were born with new mutations in this gene who had a very severe condition, like from birth. And that resembled what our patient had. So there are also patients who have something we call a variant of uncertain significance. It's called VUS. And this is something that happens in genetic testing. Sometimes we can say for sure that a variant probably causes disease. Sometimes we can say it probably doesn't cause disease. And then there's sometimes we don't know enough about it to say for sure. And if you get one of those in your genetic testing results, it can be a long journey for you to really figure out if that's the answer for whatever condition you're seeing the doctor for. And it can often, these patients will go on what we call a diagnostic odyssey, where they'll continue getting more and more tests and trying to figure out what's wrong with them because we don't have all the answers yet. And so that was sort of the underlying premise. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if this main character had a brother who had one of these VUS variants in that gene BIC-D2, which I know very well from my work on it. And wouldn't it be interesting if his goal was to prove once and for all that it was responsible for his brother's disease? And so it's kind of an exciting time period to be thinking about genetic testing because more and more gene therapies are being put forth for clinical trials and new investigations. And you could imagine it will be soon very viable to know exactly what your diagnosis is if you have a genetic disorder, because many of them may be treatable with gene therapy. So there's real reason to want to have the final answer on whether a variant causes disease.
Mm-hmm. I noted that you wrote a book also about writing, basically about writing science fiction, but using science.
Yes, I did have that one around here. Yeah, I do. That's my nonfiction book with Writer's Digest books. It's called Putting the Science in Fiction. I didn't write the whole thing myself. This actually, this grew out of my blog series. I have this ongoing blog series where I invite scientists and doctors and other experts to come on the blog, and basically I just say, tell us what your area of expertise is and how people who write science fiction or fantasy or other genres mess it up and it really bothers you. because it, obviously that was a personal question for me when I was a geneticist, and it bothers me when I see these common misconceptions about genetics in media. And so I started inviting all these other experts to come and share their area of expertise. And it grew into this long running series. It's over 100 articles. And we eventually developed that into a book with a Writer's Digest books. And so it's got a foreword by Chuck Wendig, which is hilarious. And that alone is worth getting the book. But yes, it's my passion. So I'm really into education for other writers and giving back to the writing community and sharing what I know. And I managed to convince about 30 or 40 other experts to do the same.
That's great. So what was the biggest challenge in writing and putting out Domesticating Dragons? And how did you overcome that challenge?
Oh, well, I've been working on this book for a number of years. I think the biggest challenge is weaving a storyline that was believable and had some real good science in it, but could also have a world where dragons are somewhat commonplace, right? And so,
But
I
they're
kept
not
coming
real?
back to this question of why dragons, and okay, but why does this company want to make dragons? And I had to come up with good reasons for that, even though to me as a dragon lover, it seems like a no-brainer. But I'm not everyone, so I recognize that. So I think that was the challenge, is to really develop this story, which really ranges from the protagonist's childhood, from learning that his brother has this disease, all the way into adulthood where he's really trying to do something about it. So I think it was challenging to bring that together into a single narrative, and it took several goes and some really good editing from my agent and my editors. But I'm happy with how it turned out.
Great. And what character did you love or hate the most when writing the book, and why?
Oh, I don't really hate characters that I have to write. I love writing many of them. And what's funny is that I have worked in sort of the broader field of biotechnology for so long that I've met lots of interesting people. And some of the characters in this book are based on people that I knew in real life. And so I really enjoyed kind of bringing some of their personalities and quirks into the book. That's absolutely my favorite part. And I did that for my last series as well. I have a colleague of mine who was a minor character who, of course, died very quickly in my other books. So I like to bring a touch of reality into that, and that's my favorite part.
Okay. And what can we expect from you in the near future?
In the near future, how near do you want to go?
how how near do you want to go?
All right. Well, you can expect two things. First, I have just agreed with Writer's Digest Books, which is now owned by Penguin Random House, to do a second nonfiction title. It's going to be Putting the Fact in Fantasy. So it's the fantasy side of the science education, where I have historians and linguists and people with expertise in the medieval times and technologies coming to share what they know with an eye towards helping people who write fantasy, secondary world fantasy or historical fantasy. So that I have coming out. I think that's not coming out until 2022. But I'm also writing a sequel to Domesticating Dragons. And so I think you can expect to see that from me sometime in the near future, probably about a year from now.
Wonderful. All right. And now I have some questions for you about being a writer. What's your favorite part of being a writer, and on the whole writing and publishing process? And what do you think has been your greatest lesson in the journey so far?
These are good questions. Probably my favorite parts of being a writer are, number one, I like seeing my name on things like books. But my favorite part of the experience has been the writing community. I mean, there are many, many authors out there. Everyone is very supportive of one another. There are great people who work in books and publishing and book selling like you, who are very passionate about the genre and about books in general, and often build their whole lives around supporting some little corner of books and publishing. And that has been my favorite part, is meeting lots of people who think like I do, who love books like I do, and who want to be part of the community. So lessons learned, I think there are too many to count. I would just say that I knew going in, when I decided to get serious about this, and I wanted to really try and become a writer, I knew it was going to be hard and that it was going to be challenging to like break in and build a career. And I don't think I appreciated just how hard or just how difficult or competitive it is, because you're competing not only to write books that are good enough to be published, but to find a publisher who wants to publish your book. And then when you do get your book published, you're competing to get people to read your book against all the other wonderful books out there. And that is a significant challenge, right? There are so many books being published. There are even books by my friends, which I know are going to be awesome. I don't even have time to read them all. And so I think it's a competitive world where we're always competing for people's attention, and that's hard to do. But the upside of that is the community I mentioned. Like, everyone in this community gets it, and we understand how hard it is. We support one another emotionally, and I think that helps us get through.
So are there any groups or clubs or organizations that you'd recommend to other writers that have helped you in your career?
There are. I mean, some of them are small, and I would definitely recommend that people who are interested in this to find their small tribe, as it's called. You know, people who can be your close friends and confidants. I'm in a group of writers who are it's just a support group where we like emotionally support one another through the successes and inevitable failures of being a writer. But I'm also part of larger organizations that do good thing, like the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, also called SIFWA. I'm a member of that organization and very proud to be part of what they're doing for the author community and for the science fiction and fantasy genres as a whole. So I definitely recommend, whatever you write, there's usually a professional organization where you can be part of that in the industry. And I recommend people who are serious to check that out.
Okay. And what piece of advice would you give to other authors?
To other authors? Well, it depends. Are we talking like Robert Jordan? Because I don't really have much to give somebody like that's already very well established. Or are you speaking like aspiring authors?
Aspiring authors.
Okay. I would say that I get this question a lot, and there are sort of many tropey, bandied about answers, but I'd say one thing that is very important for your mental health is to make one or two good friends who you can tell anything to, and they'll do the same for you. Because it's so important to have people who both will be your support network, but are part of the system and know what it's like in the industry. And like, lots of people have very close friends and family members who are wonderfully supportive, but they may not understand, unless they're writers themselves, exactly all the nuances of what it's like to be in this. So that's my main advice, is to make a couple good friends who are at similar stage to you, so that you can share triumphs and tragedies together.
Would you suggest they be in the same genre?
They don't have to be. I don't think that's necessary at all. It can help, but I mean, in my writer support group, there are only 2 like adult science fiction and fantasy writers out of 20 plus members. There's people who write different age categories, different genres. And I actually like that, because I've read some of their work and I would never have read that type of book if it hadn't been a close friend who I knew really well. So it's good to find people who get it, but they don't have to write the exact same things as you.
Okay. What has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Favorite adventure? That's a good question. I mean, one highlight of my career was when the nonfiction book came out. I got to go to New York Comic Con. This was a couple years ago. This was in 2018, and I had not been to a New York City or San Diego Comic Con before, and so I guess I knew that it was going to be a big thing. There were going to be lots of people there into the same things I was into, but I didn't really appreciate just how many people there were. And like, when I went into NYCC and I was in sort of the main area, I just looked around and I realized that I had never been in a crowd as large as that ever in my life. And the best part is, like, it was New York City Comic Con. So there's people dressed as Klingons and bounty hunters and everything else. So it's like, there's so many people here that are so great, and they love all the same things as me. And I got to do a panel with Chuck Wendig, who's hilarious and entertaining, and very experienced in this genre. And I got to meet a lot of other people who were who are readers or who are fans or who are authors that are into this sort of thing. So that was like my big adventure. I mean, I'm sure I will never reach that pinnacle of achievement ever again, but that's the first thing that came to mind when you asked me what's my favorite adventure.
Okay. And what was the greatest lesson you've learned in your writing career overall?
Lesson I've learned. I think that it was the hardest lesson, and was early, was that nobody's quite as good as they think they are usually. And when I decided to become a writer, a fiction writer, I'd been writing like scientific articles and nonfiction for some time. And I thought, oh, this is gonna be like easy for me because I've been reading books forever. And I felt like I was a pretty competent writer. And then I went into this introduction to fiction writing class with 20 other students, and I was like the worst person there at writing. And I was just like, it was very shocking for me. It's just a very different skill set, and it takes a lot of practice. And so that was the hardest early lesson for me, is like, wow, I really am not by default good at this, and I'm going to have to really work at it. And that is, that's a lesson that continues to prove itself true, even 12 years later or something. I'm still working to improve how I write, and recognizing that I'm not near the top of people who are writing right now. So it's a hard lesson, but it's a very important one.
Okay. Now I have some questions about you, and what is the one thing that most people don't realize about you?
That they don't realize about me? Well, I wear my heart on my sleeve, so most of the things I think and feel and like are pretty well known to anybody who knows me. But one little side hobby I have that surprised a lot of people is I also am a painter. So I dabble in this. I fully admit I am not an artist of any real stripe. I'm not good at this stuff, but I like painting, and so it's something my family and I took up some years ago and got the materials and have done some painting. And so it's a little hobby I have that is just for fun, and I don't do it for profit or for fame or for anything other than just kind of relaxing and enjoyment. Actually, I think I've got one of my paintings in here. Yeah, so this is something I painted.
Wow, that's
so
beautiful.
It's like a little canvas, and that took me forever.
This is you're not a painter.
This is based on a very famous Van Gogh painting, and you notice it's very small, but it still took me like untold hours to do that. But it's just a fun little hobby I have that surprises people.
That's great. That's really nice, actually.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. And that kind of leads me into my next question is what is or are your passions when you're not writing, and how do you make time for your hobbies, things that you love?
Well, my first passion is my family. I really like spending time with my family. They are generously tolerant of my writing habit, and all the things that come with it. We are very outdoorsy people, so we like to go outside and hike and boat and fish. And my personal hobby right now, we're talking, it's early December. I'm a bow hunter, so this is like our time of year. It's open bow hunting season, so I bow hunt for white-tailed deer, and I am often not around. I'm disappear into the woods. I'm gone for like long periods of time, and people are wondering where I am. It's because I'm out with my bow and arrows out in the woods.
Wow. Okay. What questions do you wish interviewers would ask you, and what would the answer be?
What do I wish they would ask me? I wish they would ask me how many of your books can we order or buy? That would be a great question to get that I don't get a lot. And the answer is as many as you want. But many of the questions you've asked me today are things that I think a lot of writers get. Something that I haven't been asked very often, but I'm kind of curious to explore is people ask like, do you put yourself in your books or any of your characters like based on you or about you? And with Domesticating Dragons, I can say, there is definitely some of me in the main character because he's a genetic engineer and he's a scientist, and so you probably can very much sense my voice coming through in that character. In my other series, my fantasy series, the main character is Vegas Magician. So you could say I probably have less in common with him, but I like to think some of his wit and charm are the wit and charm that I wish I could have all the time.
You're missing your first book up there.
Oh yeah, let's see. It's called The Rogue Retrieval. And
Yeah.
those are the 3 books there. I like to keep myself inspired, right? This is my work office here. I like to remind myself what it's all about, because sometimes when you're in the hard slog of like the writing, you're like, oh, I'm never going to finish this book. This thing will never get done. I like to remind myself, I have done it. It is possible to do. I've done it more than once. So I can get there if I just keep at it.
Yeah. My next question is actually, what does your writing space look like? And
oh yeah, wow,
what do you
that's
need?
the right question. So this
What do
is
you
it.
need
This is my
your rep
little
to do?
office here, and it's probably a little cleaner than it normally is, since I knew I'd be on video with you today. But it's a desk, and I have my books up, and I have stuffed bookshelves that are out of frame that you can't really see. But it's my little nook. I don't do all my writing in here. I actually write wherever I have my laptop with me. I do my writing there, so I can work anywhere. I do it in the car if I'm not driving, or on the couch or whatever. So I'm pretty flexible in that regard. But this is where I come when it's time to get the serious writing done.
And what do you need to have around you while you're writing or editing?
Caffeine, salty snack, and usually lemon heads. Those are 3 things that keep me going.
Lemon heads?
Yeah, lemon heads, like a hard lemon candy that gets soft after you suck on it for a while. That's my vice, and it's like gives me something to do while I'm kind of working on a writing problem. And it's not the best thing for you because they're pretty much entirely sugar, but I tell myself it's not the worst thing either. So.
And while you're writing, do you prefer music, silence?
I'm not a music writer. I find it distracting because the lyrics will start to interfere with my brain and then leak into whatever I'm trying to write. I like silence or white noise, and I think those are helpful for me just in my day job too. I don't like I like either steady silence or the hum of some background noise, just so that I don't get interrupted. I'm easily distracted, and I'm very aware of that, so I try and minimize distractions as much as possible.
Okay. And a lot of times authors have either furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions with them through their work. And do you have any of those? And do they help you or hinder you? Or
I have a dog. I have a border terrier, and he is not like next to me all the time while I'm writing, but it's good to have him around, especially if I'm like at home alone and everyone else is off somewhere working. I know it's at least me and the dog, so I'm not totally by myself. But I don't have like the cat that sits on my keyboard or anything like that. I'm lucky to have avoided that so far.
okay. All right. And you just mentioned you have foods and drinks, so you've already answered that. And how important, I guess New England setting is not important at all to your to your books. That was one of my other questions. But where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, which is one of the places that
yes. Wait, before we go to that, what was your other question about setting and books?
Is New England is a New England setting at all important?
Oh, okay. New England setting. Okay. Well, I have much love for New England. This particular book that we're talking about happens in the American Southwest, so it's not in New England. But so we'll go to your next question. Aside from your lovely bookshop, which is, of course, where people should go first to look for my books, and we will make sure that that you have some of them on hand, won't we?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. That's the correct answer. My books can be found where fine books are sold, at major retailers, in brick and mortar stores, and online too. So I think you can find them anywhere. And if you look me up, you can find me online. I'm on Twitter quite a bit. My website is dankoboldt.com. You can find me there. You can check out the blog series and find out more about all my books too.
And I'm going to give a little plug here to Annie's Bookstop of Worcester. We're at 65 James Street in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we also will do orders online. So you send an email to orders@anniesbooksworcester.com, and we will actually send the books to you. And basically, we do curbside delivery also. So yeah, and mail order service. So, and you can come to the store and you can buy any stores you want, any stores, right? Any books that you want. And if we don't have it, we will get it for you.
How long have you been in Worcester, if I may ask?
Excuse me?
How long have you had your store in Worcester, if I may ask?
We have been at this particular location, I believe it's 10 years.
Wow.
And we were in, well, we've been in Worcester 10 years, and we were in Auburn, which is the next town over, for several years too. So we've been around for a while. And so, and hopefully we'll be around for a while longer. Hopefully.
Yes, we hope so.
Indie bookstores are the best. Yes.
They are. Support your local bookshop, please. Or
Yes.
Annie's bookshop, even if it's not local.
Right. So how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
If you go to my website, which I'm hoping we can somehow link to, it's dankoboldt.com. I have an email newsletter I send out about once a month. And if you sign up for that, you always know what's going on with me, what books I have coming out, what new stuff is going up on the blog. It's the best way to really follow me if you're not going to physically follow me around Ohio.
Great. All right. So, well, thank you very much, Dan. And those are all the questions I have for you today.
Well, thanks so much. I really enjoyed doing this.
All right. And we will hopefully see your second dragon book next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon. Bye.